The scream tore through the pre-dawn silence of the suburban home, a sound unlike any Sarah and David had ever heard from their 5-year-old daughter Ilara. It wasn't the sharp, frustrated cry of a child with sensory overload, nor the soft, repetitive hum that often accompanied her quiet play. This was a primal shriek, laced with an ancient terror that seemed to echo from beyond the walls of their modern house. They burst into her room, the faint glow of the nightlight casting long, dancing shadows across the familiar space. Ilara was thrashing in her bed, her small body contorted, her eyes wide open but unfocused, staring at something unseen, something horrifying. Her breath hitched, ragged and shallow, as if she had just surfaced from an icy abyss. "The water was so cold," she gasped, her voice raw, not quite her own. "And they locked us down there. They locked us in." Sarah rushed to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace, trying to soothe the tremors that racked Ilara's frame. David stood frozen in the doorway, the impossible words hanging in the frigid air of the room. Locked down where? What water? Ilara had never been near anything more than a swimming pool, and even then she preferred the shallow end. She had never spoken of being locked anywhere. Her autism often meant a limited vocabulary, focused on her immediate, predictable world. Yet these words, these terrifying, specific words, tumbled from her lips with an unnerving clarity. The room, usually a sanctuary of quiet order, now felt charged with an unseen presence, a chilling draft that seemed to seep from Ilara herself. The digital clock on her bedside table glowed, 3:17 a.m., a time that would forever be etched into their memories as the moment their world fractured. Before we delve deeper into this chilling mystery, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. Your engagement helps us uncover more untold stories. The winter of 2019 had been unusually harsh, a relentless siege of ice and snow that seemed to press down on everything, muffling sound, dulling color. The world outside their window was a monochrome landscape, stark and unforgiving. Inside, their home had always been a haven, a carefully constructed environment designed to provide comfort and predictability for Ilara. Sarah, a meticulous architect, had ensured every corner was soft, every light diffused, every sound dampened. David, a software engineer, had built intricate routines, a digital fortress of calm around their daughter. Ilara thrived on this order, her days a predictable rhythm of sensory play, quiet observation, and the occasional burst of joyful, if repetitive, song. She was a child of patterns, of logic, of the tangible. Fantasies were not her domain. But that night, the patterns shattered, the logic dissolved. The tangible became terrifyingly fluid. The air in the house, usually warm and still, now carried a subtle, almost imperceptible chill, a dampness that clung to the skin. Outside, the wind howled, a mournful, distant sound that seemed to carry a lament from across vast, dark waters. The snow, usually a pristine blanket, now felt heavy, oppressive, as if burying something ancient and terrible beneath its weight. David, trying to regain some semblance of control, checked the thermostat, the windows, the doors. Everything was sealed, yet the cold persisted, emanating from Ilara's room, from Ilara herself. Ilara, usually so withdrawn, so focused on her internal world, now seemed to be a conduit for something vast and ancient. Her eyes, often averted or fixed on a single, repetitive motion, now held a depth that was unsettling. They seemed to see beyond the wallpaper, beyond the familiar toys, into a distant, terrifying past. Her small hands, usually fluttering with a nervous energy or meticulously arranging her blocks, now moved with a strange, deliberate grace. She would trace invisible lines in the air, as if outlining a structure only she could perceive. Her parents watched, bewildered and terrified, as their daughter, their quiet, predictable Ilara, began to transform. It was as if a veil had been lifted, or perhaps torn away, revealing a consciousness far older than her 5 years. The days that followed were a blur of growing dread. Ilara stopped playing with her usual toys. Instead, she demanded paper and crayons. Her first drawings were not of houses or trees or smiling suns. They were intricate, unsettling blueprints. Dark, angular shapes emerged from her small hand, lines crisscrossing, forming corridors, stairwells, vast, cavernous spaces. There were no windows, only portholes, small and round, looking out onto an endless, inky blackness. She drew figures too, not the simple stick figures of a child, but detailed, terrified faces, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide with panic. And everywhere, the water. It seeped into every drawing, depicted with a chilling realism that made Sarah's stomach clench. Waves crashed against unseen walls, dark currents swirled around submerged objects, and tiny, desperate hands reached out from the depths. David, trying to find a rational explanation, searched online for images of old ships, thinking perhaps Ilara had seen something, some obscure documentary. But Ilara's drawings were too specific, too detailed. She drew the intricate lattice of a grand staircase, the ornate paneling of a dining saloon, the cramped, utilitarian bunks of a steerage cabin, details that were not common knowledge, not easily found in children's books or even popular documentaries. He showed her pictures of various historical ships, hoping she would point to one, confirm a source. She merely shook her head, her gaze distant. "No," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. It was bigger and colder. Whoa! The inexplicable events began subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. A sudden, sharp drop in temperature in Ilara's room, even with the heating on full blast. The faint, metallic tang of salt water in the air, even though they lived hundreds of miles from the coast. A distant, mournful sound, like a foghorn that only Ilara seemed to hear, causing her to flinch and cover her ears. One evening, as Sarah read her a bedtime story, a small antique locket, a family heirloom that had been locked away in a drawer for years, inexplicably appeared on Ilara's pillow. It was cold to the touch, and when Sarah opened it, it was empty, but the faint scent of old rosewater seemed to emanate from its tarnished silver. The tension in the house grew with each passing hour, a suffocating blanket of fear and bewilderment. Sarah and David found themselves whispering, their eyes constantly darting towards Ilara, then to each other, a silent question hanging between them. What is happening to our daughter? Ilara, meanwhile, seemed to be drifting further away, her moments of lucidity increasingly rare, replaced by periods of intense, almost trance-like focus on her drawings, or by sudden, inexplicable outbursts of terror. She would point to a corner of the room and whisper about the dark figures, or recoil from the tap water, claiming it was too deep. Then came the breaking point, a moment that shattered any remaining illusion of normalcy. It was a Tuesday afternoon, grey and bleak, the snow still falling relentlessly outside. Ilara was sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by her latest creations. She had drawn a vast, opulent dining room, filled with shadowy figures, some feasting, others looking terrified. In the center of the drawing, she had meticulously rendered a specific, ornate clock, its hands frozen at an impossible time. She looked up at her parents, her eyes clear, almost piercing. "The clock in the third-class dining saloon," she said, her voice steady, devoid of her usual childlike lilt. "It stopped at 2:18, just before the lights went out for good. It had a cherub carved into the base, holding a broken trident." Sarah and David exchanged a horrified glance. They had never heard of a clock in the third-class dining saloon, let alone one with such specific, bizarre details. David, his hands trembling, pulled out his phone and typed frantically. He searched for Titanic third-class dining saloon clock. The results were sparse, mostly general descriptions. But then, buried deep in an obscure historical forum, a single grainy black-and-white photograph appeared. It was a detail shot, taken by a passenger, of a small ornate clock. Its hands were indeed frozen at 2:18, and at its base, barely visible in the faded image, was a cherub, its tiny hand clutching what appeared to be a broken trident. The photograph was dated April 14th, 1912. It was a detail so obscure, so utterly impossible for a 5-year-old to know, that it ripped through their carefully constructed reality like a torpedo. The air left their lungs, leaving them gasping in the sudden, terrifying vacuum of the impossible. Ilara wasn't just remembering, she was there. The photograph of the cherub clock, frozen at 2:18, burned itself into Sarah and David's minds, an irrefutable, chilling testament to the impossible. It was a detail so specific, so deeply buried in the annals of history, that its revelation by their 5-year-old daughter transcended mere coincidence or a child's vivid imagination. It was a direct, terrifying whisper from the past, echoing in their quiet living room. The silence that followed Ilara's pronouncement was thick, suffocating, broken only by the relentless sifting of snow against the window panes. Their world, once so firmly anchored in the tangible, had been violently unmoored, cast adrift on a sea of the inexplicable. They looked at Ilara, not as their daughter, but as a vessel, a conduit for a memory that defied all logic, all understanding. The fear was no longer a creeping dread, it was a cold, hard knot in their stomachs, a certainty that something profoundly unnatural had taken root in their home. Before we continue this journey into the heart of an untold tragedy, remember to hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts on this unfolding mystery in the comments below. Your insights are invaluable. The aftermath of that revelation was a descent into a waking nightmare. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage for a haunting. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, every shadow seemed to hold a sinister significance. Sarah and David moved through their days in a daze, their conversations hushed, their eyes constantly scanning, searching for answers, for reassurance, for anything that could explain the impossible. Ilara, meanwhile, seemed to exist on a different plane. Her moments of terror were interspersed with periods of profound, almost adult-like melancholy. She would stare out the window at the falling snow, her small face etched with an ancient sorrow, murmuring phrases like, "The cold never truly leaves you," or "Some secrets are meant to stay buried." The strange climate outside seemed to mirror their internal turmoil. The winter, already severe, intensified. Blizzards raged for days, trapping them indoors, isolating them further. The sky remained a perpetual bruised grey, and the sun, when it dared to appear, cast a weak, watery light that offered no warmth, no comfort. Anomalous phenomena became more frequent, more pronounced. The faint smell of salt water in Ilara's room intensified, sometimes accompanied by the distinct odor of coal smoke. Objects would shift on shelves, seemingly of their own accord. A glass of water, left on Ilara's bedside table, would sometimes be found half-frozen, even in a heated room. The mournful foghorn sound became a regular occurrence, always just beyond the threshold of hearing for Sarah and David, but clear and terrifying to Ilara, who would clutch her ears and whimper. Ilara's behavior became increasingly unsettling. She began to speak in a vocabulary far beyond her years, using archaic terms and formal sentence structures. She would refer to her parents as Mr. and Mrs. Miller, in moments of distress, as if they were strangers, or perhaps figures from a distant past. Her drawings evolved from blueprints to vivid, almost photographic depictions of scenes from the Titanic. She drew the grand staircase, not as a static structure, but as a chaotic scene of panic, with people scrambling, slipping, their faces contorted in terror. She drew the boiler rooms, dark and infernal, with men frantically shoveling coal, their faces streaked with soot and fear. She drew the lifeboats, not enough of them, pulling away from the sinking behemoth, leaving hundreds behind in the icy blackness. Her connection to something greater, something vast and tragic, was undeniable. She would sometimes stand perfectly still, her head cocked, as if listening to a distant symphony of screams and groans. Her small body would shiver uncontrollably, even when wrapped in blankets, as if she were perpetually cold, perpetually wet. She would refuse to take baths, screaming about the deep water and the darkness below. It was as if the memories were not just fragments, but a living, breathing entity slowly consuming her, pulling her back into the abyss. Sarah and David watched, helpless, as their daughter became less and less herself, and more a ghost of a past tragedy. Desperate, Sarah and David began to reach out, first to Ilara's pediatrician who, after a series of tests, could offer no medical explanation for her sudden, dramatic shift in behavior. Then to child psychologists who suggested trauma, vivid imagination, or a new manifestation of her autism, but none could account for the impossible historical details. Finally, with heavy hearts and a growing sense of desperation, they contacted Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned historian specializing in maritime disasters, particularly the Titanic. Dr. Reed, a woman of sharp intellect and even sharper skepticism, initially dismissed their claims as the product of grief-stricken parents and a child's overactive mind. She had heard countless stories of Titanic obsession, of people claiming connections to the ill-fated liner. But something in Sarah's voice, a raw, undeniable terror, compelled her to agree to a meeting. Dr. Reed arrived on a particularly bleak afternoon, her demeanor professional, her expression guarded. She carried a worn leather briefcase filled with documents, a testament to her meticulous research. She listened patiently as Sarah and David recounted Ilara's screams, her impossible words, the chilling accuracy of her drawings, culminating in the revelation of the cherub clock. Dr. Reed's initial skepticism was palpable, a shield against the fantastical. She asked Ilara a series of questions, gentle but probing, about the ship, its layout, its passengers. Ilara, usually withdrawn around strangers, responded with an unnerving clarity, describing the third-class dining saloon, the narrow corridors, the smell of stale bread and fear. She spoke of the unseen passages and the locked gates that separated the lower decks from the upper ones. Dr. Reed, still unconvinced, pulled out a series of detailed blueprints of the Titanic, some of them rarely seen outside of specialized archives. She laid them out on the living room floor, challenging Ilara to identify specific locations. Ilara, without hesitation, pointed to a section of the third-class deck plan, indicating a series of interconnected rooms and corridors that were indeed part of the steerage accommodation. Then, with a small, trembling finger, she traced a line on the blueprint, indicating a specific unmarked door. "That," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "was where they kept the special cargo, and where they locked us in." Dr. Reed's brow furrowed. The blueprint showed no such door, no such cargo hold in that location. It was an anomaly, a detail that contradicted the official plans. The historian, her skepticism still firmly in place, decided to test Ilara further. She produced a series of photographs of various Titanic artifacts and locations, some well-known, others extremely obscure. Ilara identified them all with ease, often adding details that were not visible in the photographs themselves. She described the specific pattern of the linoleum in the third-class general room, the unique design of the ventilation grates in the boiler rooms, the exact location of a small, often overlooked emergency ladder near the stern. Dr. Reed, a woman who had dedicated her life to the minutiae of the Titanic, found herself increasingly unnerved. These were not details found in popular culture. These were the domain of obsessive researchers, of those who had spent decades poring over every surviving document, every obscure testimony. The dramatic breaking point arrived when Dr. Reed, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly, pulled out a thick, leather-bound book from her briefcase. It was a collection of obscure survivor testimonies, privately published and rarely seen. She flipped to a specific page, her finger tracing a line of faded text. "In this account," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "a third-class passenger, a young woman named Bridget O'Malley, describes a small, unmarked door near the aft staircase on E-deck, a door that was supposedly used for crew access to a rarely used storage area. She claimed to have seen men, not crew, moving crates through it in the hours before the collision. Her testimony was largely dismissed as a hallucination due to shock. Dr. Reed looked up, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. And she also mentioned a cherub clock in the dining saloon, stopping at 2:18, just as the lights flickered out. Ilara, who had been quietly observing, suddenly pointed to the blueprint again, her finger landing precisely on the spot where she had indicated the special cargo door. It was the exact location described in Bridget O'Malley's obscure testimony. Dr. Reed's face went ashen. Her professional skepticism, her lifetime of rational inquiry, crumbled in that instant. She had spent decades debunking myths, separating fact from fiction. But Ilara's knowledge, corroborated by such an obscure, dismissed historical account, was irrefutable. It was an impossibility made terrifyingly real. The historian, a woman of science and logic, was now staring into the abyss of the supernatural, confronted by a truth that defied every principle she held dear. The past wasn't just being remembered, it was actively bleeding into the present, and Ilara was the living, breathing proof. The name, when it finally came, was a whisper, barely audible above the relentless drumming of the winter storm outside. Ilara, her eyes distant, her small hand tracing the outline of an invisible ship in the air, spoke it with a chilling clarity. Bridget O'Malley. The sound of it hung in the air, a spectral echo from a century past, solidifying the impossible. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. David felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a recognition of the name Dr. Reed had mentioned, the obscure survivor whose testimony had been dismissed. It was no longer just about a ship or a tragedy. It was about a person, a life, a soul that had somehow found its way back, lodged within their daughter. The implications were staggering, terrifying, and utterly undeniable. Their quiet, suburban life had been irrevocably shattered, replaced by a haunting reality that defied every known law of nature. Before we delve into the shocking truth behind this name, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts on reincarnation in the comments below. Your perspective adds to the depth of this mystery. The family was now fully immersed in a nightmare that had no escape. The initial shock had given way to a profound, unsettling acceptance. Dr. Reed, the once skeptical historian, had become their most fervent, if still bewildered, ally. Her academic reputation was on the line, but the sheer weight of Ilara's impossible knowledge had transformed her from a detached observer into a desperate seeker of truth. Other experts, those who had initially dismissed the Millers, had either retreated in bewildered silence or, like Dr. Reed, found themselves drawn into the vortex of the inexplicable. The atmosphere in the house was heavy, thick with unspoken fears and the constant subtle hum of the supernatural. The outside world, with its mundane concerns and predictable rhythms, seemed distant, irrelevant, a fading memory compared to the vivid, terrifying reality unfolding within their walls. Ilara's connection to Bridget O'Malley became almost complete. She would often respond to the name Bridget, turning her head, her eyes momentarily losing their childlike innocence, replaced by a weary, adult gaze. She spoke of her family on the ship, of her brother Liam and her mother Maeve, with a longing that was heartbreaking. Her personality shifted, becoming more mature, more burdened by the weight of her memories. She would sometimes sit in silence, her small hands clasped tightly, as if bracing herself against an unseen force, a memory too painful to bear. She expressed fear not just of the sinking, but of who was on the ship, of the dark men who moved in the shadows, of the things they carried. Her fear was not of the water, but of the deliberate malice that had accompanied it. With Bridget O'Malley's name as their guide, Dr. Reed and David embarked on a painstaking, obsessive search through the labyrinthine archives of 1912 passenger manifests and survivor lists. The task was monumental, sifting through thousands of names, cross-referencing, looking for any mention of a Bridget O'Malley, particularly one traveling in third class. Days bled into nights, fueled by strong coffee and a desperate hope. The digital archives were scoured, then the microfiches, then the dusty, brittle paper records in forgotten corners of historical societies. The air in Dr. Reed's study, where they worked, grew thick with the scent of old paper and the unspoken tension of their quest. Then, late one night, as a particularly violent blizzard raged outside, rattling the windows of Dr. Reed's study, David let out a choked cry. His finger trembled on the screen, pointing to a faded entry in a passenger manifest. "Bridget O'Malley," he whispered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "Age 23, traveling from County Clare Island, 3rd class, destination New York." The name was there. The age, the origin, the class, everything matched Ilara's fragmented memories. A wave of profound, terrifying validation washed over them, quickly followed by a chilling dread. But the dread deepened when they cross-referenced the name with the official casualty lists. Bridget O'Malley was listed as deceased. All cause of death, drowned. A simple, stark entry, one among the 1,500 souls lost that night. However, Ilara's memories were anything but simple. She spoke of a struggle, of being pushed, of a deliberate act of violence in the chaos of the lower decks. "They didn't want us to see," she had whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "They pushed us back into the water. It wasn't just the cold." The official record, a neat, concise summary of a tragic accident, now felt like a deliberate lie, a carefully constructed facade. The discrepancy opened a chasm of new, terrifying questions. If Bridget O'Malley had simply drowned, why did Ilara remember a struggle, a deliberate act of malice? Why did she speak of dark men and things they carried? The official narrative of the Titanic's sinking, a story of an unfortunate collision with an iceberg and a heroic, if ultimately futile, struggle against the elements, began to unravel. Darker elements began to emerge from Ilara's fragmented memories, whispers of secret cargo, of powerful figures on board, of a deliberate cover-up that had lasted for over a century. Ilara's drawings, once just unsettling, now took on a sinister new meaning. She drew men in dark suits, not crew, moving heavy crates in the dead of night. She drew a specific symbol, a stylized serpent devouring its own tail, etched onto the side of one of the crates. The feeling that they were digging into something dangerous, something far beyond a simple historical re-examination, grew with each new revelation. Dr. Reed, initially driven by academic curiosity, now felt a cold fear gripping her. This wasn't just about the Titanic. It was about a hidden truth, a suppressed history that powerful forces had gone to great lengths to bury. The unmarked door Ilara had pointed out on the blueprint, the special cargo she had described. These were no longer just anomalies. They were pieces of a puzzle, hinting at a conspiracy far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The iceberg, Ilara insisted, was merely a catalyst, a convenient scapegoat for a tragedy that was orchestrated or at the very least deliberately exacerbated. The dramatic breaking point arrived on a night when Ilara's memories became almost unbearably vivid. She was in a trance-like state, her body rigid, her voice no longer her own, but that of Bridget O'Malley. She described in horrifying detail a specific event that occurred in the chaotic hours before the ship fully sank. They were in the hold, near the aft staircase. Bridget's voice rasped from Ilara's lips. Moving the crates, they didn't want anyone to see. When the water came, they sealed the gates, not to save the upper decks, but to keep us from seeing what they were doing. My brother Liam, he tried to get through. He saw something, a man in a dark suit. He pushed Liam back into the rising water. He didn't drown, he was silenced. The words hung in the air, a chilling accusation from the grave. David, his face pale, remembered a cryptic, almost erased entry he had found in a digitized version of a long-forgotten newspaper clipping. A brief mention of a disturbance in the third-class section, quickly dismissed as panic. Dr. Reed, her hands shaking, pulled out a copy of a rare, privately circulated memoir by a junior officer who had been on duty that night. Buried deep within its pages, almost an afterthought, was a single chilling sentence. heard screams from below decks, not of drowning, but of struggle, near the aft cargo hold. Orders were given to secure all lower deck access points, regardless of those still inside. The memoir had been suppressed, its author discredited, the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying finality. Liam O'Malley, Bridget's brother, had not drowned. He had been murdered, silenced for witnessing something he shouldn't have seen. The gates were sealed not just to contain the water, but to contain the truth, to ensure that the special cargo and the men guarding it remained undisturbed, even as hundreds of lives were sacrificed. The iceberg was a convenient cover, a natural disaster that masked a far more deliberate, far more sinister act. The Titanic tragedy, they realized with a sickening lurch, was not just an accident. It was a crime scene, and Ilara, through Bridget, was the only surviving witness. The chilling realization settled over them. The iceberg was a smokescreen, and the true horror of that night was only just beginning to surface. The chilling revelation of Liam O'Malley's deliberate silencing, whispered from Ilara's lips, tore through the last vestiges of their understanding of the Titanic disaster. It wasn't just an accident. It was a meticulously orchestrated cover-up, a crime scene disguised as a natural catastrophe. The something else Ilara had hinted at was now starkly, terrifyingly clear, a conspiracy of unimaginable scope. Born in the icy depths of the Atlantic, designed to bury a truth far more dangerous than any ship. The air in the house crackled with a new kind of tension, not just of fear, but of profound existential dread. They had unearthed a secret that powerful forces had guarded for over a century, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on them, suffocating and cold. Before we uncover the full extent of this hidden conspiracy, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share your theories on historical cover-ups in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring these untold stories to light. The family, along with Dr. Reed, now found themselves in a precarious, terrifying position. The initial bewilderment had given way to a chilling paranoia. Every shadow seemed to hold a watchful eye, every distant sound a potential threat. The outside world, once a source of comfort, now felt like a vast, indifferent entity, potentially harboring the very forces that had suppressed the truth for so long. Unexplained phone calls, silent and brief, began to plague their landline. A black sedan, always parked a few blocks away, seemed to appear whenever they left the house. Subtle threats, disguised as anonymous warnings, started arriving in their email inboxes, hinting at dire consequences should they continue their unauthorized historical research. The atmosphere was one of desperate urgency, a race against an unseen enemy that moved with silent ancient power. Ilara, now almost fully embodying Bridget O'Malley, became the central, terrifying conduit for the truth. Her memories were no longer fragmented whispers, but a torrent of detailed, horrifying recollections. She spoke with the voice of a woman who had witnessed unspeakable acts, her small body trembling with the residual terror of that night. She described the dark men not as mere thugs, but as agents of a powerful, shadowy organization, their faces cold, their actions ruthless. She detailed the hidden cargo, not just as crates, but as containing a specific ancient artifact, something of immense power or knowledge, something that certain groups believed could change the course of history. It was not gold, Bridget's voice rasped from Ilara's lips. It was something older, something that hummed with a terrible energy. They called it the heart of the deep. The conspiracy, as revealed through Bridget's memories, was laid bare with chilling clarity. It wasn't just about the Titanic. It was about a desperate attempt by a secret society known only as the Obsidian Hand to transport a powerful artifact, the heart of the deep, from Europe to America. This artifact, Ilara explained, was believed to possess properties that could influence global events, grant unimaginable power, or even unlock secrets of existence. A rival faction, the Azure Dawn, had learned of the transport and sought to intercept it. The Titanic, With its reputation for invincibility and its carefully controlled passenger list, was chosen as the perfect unsuspecting vessel for this clandestine operation. Bridget's memories painted a horrifying picture of the hours leading up to the collision. The Obsidian Hand, realizing their rivals were closing in, made a desperate, calculated decision. The iceberg, Ilara insisted, was not an accident. It was a deliberate act of sabotage orchestrated by agents of the Obsidian Hand on board, designed to sink the ship and destroy the artifact rather than let it fall into the hands of the Azure Dawn. The collision was not meant to be fatal, but a controlled breach, allowing them to jettison the artifact into the deep, where it would be irretrievable. However, the damage was far more severe than anticipated, and the ship began to sink rapidly. The something they hid was the desperate, brutal scramble in the lower decks. As the ship went down, the agents of the Obsidian Hand, along with their rivals from the Azure Dawn, who had infiltrated the ship, engaged in a deadly struggle for control of the artifact. Bridget remembered the sounds of gunfire, the flashes of light, the desperate cries of passengers caught in the crossfire. The sealed gates, the locked corridors, these were not just to contain the water, but to contain the battle, to prevent witnesses from seeing the true horror unfolding below. Liam O'Malley, Bridget's brother, had stumbled upon this clandestine war, witnessing the artifact, the struggle, and the deliberate murder of those who got in the way. His death was not an unfortunate drowning, but an execution, a silencing, to protect the secret. The evidence, pieced together from Ilara's memories and Dr. Reed's frantic research, began to form a terrifying mosaic. Fragmented, suppressed historical accounts, once dismissed as unreliable, now took on new meaning. A brief, censored report of unusual activity in the cargo hold. A survivor's testimony later recanted of men fighting with strange weapons. A coded message, intercepted by British intelligence but never fully deciphered, hinting at package secured, Deep Six. The pieces were there, scattered throughout history, waiting for a catalyst like Ilara to bring them together. The Titanic tragedy, they realized, was not just the loss of a ship, but the deliberate sacrifice of over 1,000 lives to bury a secret of immense, world-altering power. The dramatic breaking point arrived with a chilling clarity. Ilara, her eyes burning with an ancient fire, pointed to a specific location on a detailed map of the North Atlantic, a map Dr. Reed had brought. The heart of the deep, Bridget's voice resonated. It lies there, not far from the wreck. They didn't want it found, but it calls. It always calls. She then described a specific, intricate symbol, a series of interlocking geometric shapes that was etched onto the artifact itself, a symbol that was also the sigil of the Obsidian Hand. And the man who pushed Liam, Ilara continued, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, his name was Alistair Thorne. He survived. He was one of them. And his bloodline continues. They still guard the secret. They still seek the heart. The revelation of Alistair Thorne's name, a man who had survived the Titanic and whose descendants likely still existed, sent a jolt of pure terror through the room. This wasn't just history, it was a living, breathing threat. Dr. Reed, her face pale, quickly cross-referenced the name with the Titanic survivor lists. Alistair Thorne, a first-class passenger, listed as rescued. His biography mentioned a powerful, secretive family legacy, a history of influence in global finance and ancient artifacts. The symbol Ilara described, the interlocking geometric shapes, was indeed the crest of the Thorne family, a detail known only to a select few historians. The realization hit them like a tidal wave. They had not just uncovered a historical conspiracy, they had stumbled upon a living, active secret, one that had been meticulously guarded for over a century. The forces that had orchestrated the Titanic disaster, that had silenced Liam O'Malley, were still active, still powerful, and now they knew. The anonymous threats, the black sedan, the silent phone calls, they were not random. They were being watched, They were being hunted. The chapter ended with the chilling certainty that the past was not merely remembered, it was alive, and it was coming for them. The chilling revelation of Alistair Thorne's living legacy, the direct link to the architects of the Titanic conspiracy, sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated terror through the small group. The black sedan, once a vague suspicion, now felt like a predatory beast circling their home. The silent phone calls were no longer just unsettling, they were a direct message, a warning from the shadows. The past was not merely a memory for Ilara. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had finally caught up to them. The air in the house was thick with a palpable sense of dread, a suffocating awareness that they were no longer just observers of history, but active participants in a century-old war. The stakes had escalated beyond comprehension, and their lives, once ordinary, were now irrevocably intertwined with a secret that powerful forces would kill to protect. Before we unveil the final, terrifying implications of this conspiracy, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts on how ancient secrets might still influence our modern world. Your insights are crucial to understanding these hidden truths. The family was now in a desperate fight for survival. The house, once their sanctuary, felt like a trap. Dr. Reed, her academic detachment long gone, was a whirlwind of frantic activity, her laptop glowing late into the night, trying to find any leverage, any weakness in the Thorne family's impenetrable facade. Sarah and David moved with a heightened sense of awareness, every shadow a potential threat, every unfamiliar car a harbinger of danger. The outside world, once a source of comfort, now felt like a hostile, indifferent landscape, its vastness offering no refuge. The winter storm, which had been a constant companion, now seemed to rage with a new malevolent fury, mirroring the chaos that had erupted in their lives. They were on the run, even if they hadn't physically left their home, hunted by an enemy they couldn't see, but whose presence they could feel in every chilling gust of wind, every creak of the floorboards. Ilara, now almost entirely Bridget, became their most potent, yet most vulnerable weapon. Her memories were no longer just historical facts. They were tactical information, a roadmap to the conspiracy. She spoke with an unnerving blend of childlike innocence and ancient wisdom, her eyes holding the weight of a past life. She guided them, not with maps, but with feelings, with flashes of memory. "They have a place," Bridget's voice would whisper from Ilara's lips, "a house by the sea, where the old man Thorne kept his secrets." She described the layout of the house, the hidden passages, the specific symbols etched into its walls. Her connection to the past was her greatest strength, allowing them to see what others could not, but it was also her greatest vulnerability, making her the primary target of the Obsidian Hand. The final revelation, the full scope of the conspiracy, began to unfold with terrifying clarity. The Heart of the Deep was not just an artifact, it was a device, an ancient relic of unknown origin, capable of manipulating subtle energies, influencing minds, and even altering the fabric of reality itself. The Obsidian Hand, a secret society dating back centuries, believed it was their birthright to control this power, to guide humanity's destiny from the shadows. The Azure Dawn, their rival, sought to destroy it, believing its power too dangerous for any mortal hands. The Titanic was merely one battle in a millennia-long war, a war fought in the shadows, its casualties dismissed as accidents or natural disasters. Ilara's memories connected the Titanic incident directly to present-day events. Alistair Thorne, the man who had pushed Liam O'Malley to his death, had not just survived, he had thrived. Using the knowledge and influence gained from the artifact, or perhaps from the very act of its sinking, his family had amassed unimaginable wealth and power, subtly shaping global politics, finance, and technology for over a century. The Heart of the Deep, though lost, continued to exert its influence, a beacon in the abyss, drawing both factions to its location. The tragedy was much worse because it was a deliberate sacrifice, a foundational act for a hidden agenda that continued to this day, its tendrils reaching into every aspect of modern life. The world they knew, the history they were taught, was a carefully constructed lie, a facade behind which a secret war raged. The implications were global, terrifying. The Thorne family, through their control of vast corporations and political networks, was now poised to retrieve the heart of the deep, believing they could finally harness its full power. Ilara's memories revealed their current plans, their hidden facilities, their network of agents. She described a specific coded message, a sequence of numbers and symbols that would unlock a hidden vault within one of Thorne's most secure facilities, a vault containing not only the plans for the heart's retrieval, but also irrefutable evidence of the Titanic conspiracy and the Obsidian Hand's existence. The dramatic breaking point arrived with a chilling urgency. The black sedan finally pulled into their driveway, its headlights cutting through the swirling snow like predatory eyes. Figures emerged, dark and menacing, moving with a silent, practiced efficiency. They were here. The time for hiding was over. As the first heavy thud against their front door echoed through the house, Ilara, her small body trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and grim determination, clutched Sarah's hand. "The vault!" Bridget's voice, now strong and clear, resonated from her lips. "It's in the old Thorne Manor, beneath the library. The code, it's the date of the sinking reversed, followed by Liam's birth year, and the symbol, the serpent, it's the key." She then looked directly at David, her gaze piercing, ancient. "They will try to silence us again, but the truth, it cannot be drowned forever. You must expose them. You must tell the world what truly happened. For Liam, for all of us." As the front door splintered under the force of the assault, Ilara, her eyes now fixed on something beyond the walls, whispered one last, crucial piece of information, a warning that chilled them to the bone. The heart. It is not merely power. It is a living thing, and it remembers everything, and it is waking. The final image was of the family, huddled together, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a dying lamp as the sounds of breaking glass and heavy footsteps filled the house. Ilara, her small hand still clutching Sarah's, looked up, her eyes reflecting not the fear of a child, but the ancient, weary resolve of a soul that had witnessed the depths of human depravity and the terrifying power of forgotten secrets. The past had not just returned, it had burst through the door, demanding its due. The Titanic was merely the beginning, and the true tragedy, the one that continued to unfold in the present, was far, far worse. The fate of the world, it seemed, now rested on the shoulders of a 5-year-old girl and the century-old memories she carried.